Good afternoon. You are all very, very welcome to Scale Ireland's annual autumn gathering. My name is Martina Fitzgerald and I'm the CEO of Scale Ireland. And we have a full house, if everyone would sit down, but we are delighted to have a full house. We have so many founders and their teams, funders. We have the universities, we have the hubs, we have the state agencies, and we also have all our partners here. And I think that really demonstrates the strength of this community, the Scale Ireland community, and also the strength of Scale Ireland as the independent, not-for-profit representative organisation for Irish tech startups and scaling companies. So we are delighted to be joined today by the Minister for Finance, Michael McGrath. Minister, you're very welcome and thank you for joining us. And the Minister is also joined today by some leading funders and founders. And on the founder note, we're delighted to be joined by Joe Lennon, the co-founder of Workvivo, Dee Coakley, the co-founder and CEO of Boundless, Karina Turley, the co-founder and CEO of Capella, and you're all very welcome. And we're also joined by some leading funders and finance experts, including John Flynn, the managing partner of ACT Venture Capital, Louise Phelan, strategic advisor and angel investor, and Barry Brennan, a venture partner at Elkstone. You are also all very welcome. And I think you would all agree it's a very impressive lineup today. And the Minister will be contributing to their discussions on the issues, but also the potential of this sector. Now, I do have to say this is very timely because by pure coincidence, this event is taking place just ahead of the budget. And also, by pure coincidence, it happened last year and the year before, just ahead of the budget. But on a serious note, it is taking place at a critical juncture for the sector because Ireland is slipping down many of the international rankings in terms of innovation. And that is concerning and needs to be addressed urgently. And we believe that the current government's white paper on enterprise needs to be implemented if we are to fulfill its ambition of Ireland becoming a global innovation leader. Now, that ambition, of course, extends beyond one budget or one finance bill. I'm going to stop it there for now. And shortly, I'm going to hand over to the chair of Scale Ireland, Brian Caulfield, whom you all know very well, and he will introduce the Minister, and then we'll have our two panel discussions, which the Minister will contribute to. The hashtag for today is hashtag Scale Ireland Gathering. But first, I want to introduce one of our strongest supporters from day one, and Ross O'Connor, the CFO of Avolon. They have been with us since Brian and Liz set up Scale Ireland in late 2019, and yes, late 2019. And indeed, we'd like to thank the CEO of Avolon, Andy Cronin, and his predecessor, Donald Slattery, for all their support of Scale Ireland, tech startups, and this sector. So without further ado, Ross, would you like to come and welcome us all in here to this fabulous setting today? Ross, will you give a round?
Wasn't expecting this setup behind me, but thank you, Martina. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thanks for organising this, which is a fantastic event, and a huge amount of work gone in to make this a reality. So thank you very much. Minister, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming today. We're absolutely delighted to be hosting this event in Avolon today. We see it as a hugely important event, the Scale Ireland event, which supports Irish tech startups, supports companies that are looking to scale, to grow, and become ultimately global leaders. Avolon was set up in 2010, and we were set up as a startup as well. And since that point, we have grown the business significantly. But what we haven't lost is the vibrancy and excitement that goes with launching a business that's looking to disrupt the status quo in its industry and ultimately take on the world. I hope also that it's reassuring to understand and to know that Avolon was set up with this initial business plan, which was sketched out on one page in Mary Mac's pub around the corner. And since then, we've actually grown to be a leader in our industry. And we've done that from right here in Ireland. So right now, we've got a global fleet of about 600 aircraft. We have about 300 aircraft on order. We've got a truly global business. We've got customers, 149 customers in 65 countries around the world. We've got a balance sheet with total assets of about $30 billion. We're one of the top 3 global leasing companies in the world. So we've become a truly global business over that period of time. And we've benefited since day one from a strong company culture, with an emphasis, I would say, on teamwork and on shared values that ultimately have got us through and allowed us to survive some of the low points, which there have been, and there will always be. I'm sure people will know in this room, there will always be with startups, but there are also high points which are to be celebrated and really cherished as well. I would say our success, and indeed the success of aircraft leasing in Ireland, and Ireland becoming a hub for aircraft leasing, is built on a number of things, but it's built on a supportive environment that successive governments have fostered, actually. And it's built on a deep pool, or access to a deep pool of diverse talent here within Ireland. So I want to just say thank you, Minister, for firstly your attendance today, but also for the government's continued support around the business community in Ireland. Thank you very much. Beyond our portfolio and beyond our global customer base, one thing is important for Avolon, and one thing we're passionate about, and that's Irish innovation and entrepreneurship. They're principles that have been core to our business since we started, and they've been core to the success of our business through scaling. And both of those things also underpin our support of Scale Ireland here today. What we want to do is we want to share our experience that through tough work, or through hard work, through relentless innovation, and through brave and I would say driven execution, Irish companies can be leaders, they can be global leaders, they can be the best in the world. So that's our hope. And one of the things we're most proud of is our sponsorship as a founding partner of the Innovate for Ireland initiative. That's a transformative PhD scholarship program that looks to bring research students and attract leading scholars to Ireland to undertake research, primarily with a focus on sustainability themes. Through Science Foundation Ireland, we're a partner with the government on that project, and that's a project that aspires to invest 300 million over 10 years to really bring and ensure Ireland's position as a global leader in innovation. Our hope and our vision for that project is that it can foster research that then spawn new startups, and that where new startups are born. And the hope is that those startups then will benefit from the work of Scale Ireland and events like today. That's our hope, that's our ambition, that's our vision, and one we're very, very proud of. So I just want to say thank you to Scale Ireland for working with us to host today's event. I want to say welcome to everyone in the room and welcome to the Minister. And I'm certainly looking forward to an engaged and an interesting session. So thank you all very much and welcome.
Thank you very much, Ross. And I think everybody will agree that this is not only a very fabulous setting for today's event, but it's also a very appropriate one to look at promoting Irish entrepreneurs to become global leaders, given that we're here in Avolon. So thank you for all of your support. And I'm now going to hand over to the Chair of Scale Ireland, Brian Caulfield.
Thank you, Martina, and thank you also, Ross. I want to personally pay tribute to Avolon, because from the very beginning, when we were establishing Scale Ireland in late 2019, Avolon was one of our first and our strongest supporters, and we really appreciate that. That support continues today, because ultimately Andy, Ross and the Avolon team believe in our vision to make Ireland a leading location for innovation and entrepreneurship. So thank you, and we look forward to continuing the partnership. We're holding today's event at a time when our latest State of Startup Survey 2023 highlighted funding as the key issue facing startups and scaling companies. 80% of founders found raising finance either very difficult or difficult. We also have the recent publication of 2 reports on the funding landscape for the first half of the year. The IVCA report shows an impressive headline figure for investment in startups for the first 6 months of the year, but a small number, in fact, just 3 deals, which were largely power infrastructure deals, effectively contributed over half of that total. When you strip those out, and the reality is that there are deep concerns as the number of deals at below 1 million euros declined by 55% compared with the equivalent period last year. Separately, Tech Ireland's funding report, which stripped out those 3 big outliers, shows a 40% decrease in funding year on year, and that was on top of a 20% decrease in funding last year. So I want to thank the Minister for attending today. We've had very positive meetings with him and his officials in the department on the key issue of funding. I think it's fair to say that the Minister is very engaged on the issue and also on the strategic potential of the Indigenous tech sector in terms of innovation, growth, exports, and employment around the country. Indeed, over the last 5 years, both the number of tech startups and also investors in startups has trebled, demonstrating what a vibrant sector this is. So we greatly appreciate the opportunity to discuss these important issues with the Minister. So will you please give a warm round of applause to the Minister for Finance, Michael McGrath. We are now to the other speakers.
Thank you very much, Brian. I've turned on my microphone. I hope it's working. Okay, can you all hear me there? Yeah, this feels like being back in UCC. Thank you very much to Ross and the team at Avolon for hosting us here today. It's a magnificent venue, and congratulations on your continued success. And you can be assured that the government will continue to support the aircraft leasing industry. We know how important it is to our economy. We are global leaders, and we know it's a highly competitive landscape internationally, and there's no complacency on our part. So we'll continue to work with you in a spirit of collaboration to make sure that we remain attractive for continued investment. Thank you for the introduction, Brian, and thank you, Martina. Delighted to be here. I had a very good pre-budget meeting. I think it was the very first one I had this year. It was back in mid-July with Brian and Martina, where we discussed the Alliance for Innovation, a submission I know that was made in conjunction with a number of partner organisations as well, and just setting out the enormous potential that there is to further develop the tech startup sector and indeed the scale-up sector, so that we can help businesses that have started but want Ireland to be the location where they scale up and grow, and for Ireland to be the international headquarters of their business. And I think we have made a lot of progress, but I would accept that we have work to do. And that is why I set it as a priority of mine to start the engagement early in advance of the budget, because this is my first budget as Minister for Finance. I did 3 as Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform, but it's my first opportunity to really get under the bonnet of the taxation system and fully understand the different schemes that are there, what's working well, what's not working so well, and how we can make things better within the constraints. And there are always constraints, and I can't do everything. But I do believe that there will be opportunities in the budget to make tangible improvements to the overall environment within which all of you operate. And for me, that's the key issue, is to show that the government genuinely does get it, that we recognise we have made a lot of progress, but we also recognise the immense challenges that are there, not least the funding challenge, which is now front and centre. And there are significant changes happening in the global economy. We've seen very significant tightening of monetary policy, which is having an impact on the funding environment. The ECB will be meeting on tomorrow, and again, we wait to see what the outcome of that meeting is in terms of possible further decisions that they may make. But the consistent feedback that we have got is that funding is now a barrier for many startups and for businesses that want to scale up. So we have work to do to ensure that we are genuinely fostering an innovation culture and an innovation environment in Ireland. And that involves looking at all of the levers that we have at our disposal. Tax is part of it, but it's not the only lever. We have to look at the different funding instruments that we have in place across the public sector and how we can leverage the potential for further funding and capital to be made available in the private sector as well. And all of that work is ongoing. Overall, our economy is in a good place. Just to say a quick word about the backdrop as we approach the budget, which is now less than 4 weeks away at this stage. There is significant uncertainty about the global economy, and we are seeing a weakening of the external environment. That is in many respects the very purpose of tightening monetary policy. It is to dampen economic activity, to bring demand and supply more into equilibrium. And there are clear signs now in the international economy that is having an impact. We saw further evidence of that in the latest economic forecasts that the European Commission published earlier this week, where across the euro area, the level of growth is going to be very, very low this year. And some of our main trading partners are experiencing significant economic difficulties. So that is part of the backdrop within which we have to frame the budget. Thankfully, inflation is falling. It peaked in Ireland at almost 10% in the autumn of last year, so about a year ago. It has consistently fallen since then and is now around 5% using the agreed harmonised methodology for measuring inflation in Ireland. But of course, we have to get it down further. And we know that the medicine hurts. Increasing interest rates has an impact, of course, as I alluded to, but it is in all of our interests in the medium to long term that we get inflation down to a sustainable level so that all of you can plan the investments that you need to secure for your investment and give you as much certainty as possible about the business environment. Thankfully, the labour market remains really strong in Ireland, including in tech, and it was very interesting to see, notwithstanding the high-profile announcements that we have affecting a number of major tech companies in Ireland as part of that global correction, the number of people employed in technology has continued to grow. So that is reassuring that there is a lot of underlying resilience in the sector, and that is manifested in the numbers that we are seeing. And we have a record number of people now working in Ireland. We should be collectively proud of that achievement, but certainly not take it for granted, because we know we have major challenges both domestically and then facing into certain international headwinds where the environment is certainly more challenging than it was before. And indeed, there are significant geopolitical tensions around the world, and that has an impact on confidence and sentiment and the investment environment as well. For a long time, I have felt that while we are doing really well in foreign direct investment, and we have to continue to renew our offering, keep it fresh, and make sure it is as attractive as possible. And a major part of the finance bill this year will be the implementation of Pillar 2 of the global OECD tax agreement, which we signed up to in the autumn of 2021, so 2 years ago. And it is now that we and other countries are legislating for the new rate in Ireland, which will be 15% for the very large companies, those with a turnover in excess of 750 million euro. For every other business in Ireland, the corporate tax rate will remain at 12.5%. But what it does mean is that our relative advantage has narrowed in tax terms, and it means we have to look at all of the other options that we have available to us to enhance that offering, and that's work that is ongoing, and I'll have much more to say on that in the context of the budget. And we are making a significant statement tomorrow about corporate tax policy, about the adoption of the key element of what is known as the territorial system around a participation exemption for dividends. I won't go into that here, but it is an important initiative and announcement, just so that we can provide certainty and predictability about where we're going, because I think that has served us well as a country, laying out a roadmap about the direction of policy over the next number of years, so that we have, no surprises when it comes to the key considerations that all of you and others have to weigh up when you are making investment decisions. But alongside that continued refreshing of our offering for inward investment, I believe we can do more and we can do better to foster a culture of entrepreneurship and to support businesses that want to scale up in Ireland. And I have flagged early on in my time as Minister a desire and a determination to examine the various schemes that are there, the Employment Investment Incentive Scheme, the KEEP scheme, the SCI scheme, the SURE scheme, our capital gains system, the research and development tax credit system that we have here in Ireland. And I will be announcing a package of measures in the budget in 4 weeks' time that I think will make a tangible difference to the environment within which all of you operate. There are limitations. If you take, for example, EII, SCI and SURE, they all operate within what is known as the GBER regulation, the General Block Exemption Regulation. And as you know, that comes into effect on the 1st of January of next year. So what it means is some of the existing reliefs within that framework are going to have to be restricted. But it does open up opportunities to expand certain reliefs in a manner consistent with GBER under those particular schemes. So I'm examining all of that with my tax team at the moment to see what we can do in relation to KEEP. As you know, significant improvements were announced by my predecessor, Minister Donoghue, in the budget last year. But they still await state aid approval from DG Comp and the European Commission. We have been engaging with them, and I am confident that we will get an outcome to their consideration of those changes very, very shortly, hopefully in advance of budget day, and we'll be able to provide an update in relation to that. We're also examining issues around the R&D tax credit as well. A key message that I consistently hear is about the need for simplification, that there's too much red tape, bureaucracy, that accessing the schemes that are there has proven to be really difficult and unnecessarily cumbersome. And look, while schemes have to be properly regulated and governed, and of course these are tax schemes, so where we are providing tax expenditures and reliefs, we do have to make sure it's done properly. But I have been engaging with the revenue commissioners and with my own team to ensure that simplification of our taxation system is a theme of the budget, and that we put in place a process that we learn from the feedback that we have received, and that we try to make practical changes that enable greater accessibility of the various schemes that are there. And I just want to assure you that work is now well underway, and I'll have more to say about that in a number of weeks' time. When it comes to funding, of course, we have various instruments and indeed organisations that are currently playing an important role. You'll be aware of the various schemes through the Strategic Banking Corporation of Ireland. Some of their schemes have proven to be really successful, and I want to thank them and commend them for the work that they are doing in providing essential working capital for small businesses and medium businesses all over Ireland. And Microfinance Ireland is also doing very good work through their Micro Enterprise Loan Fund for startups that cannot access bank loans. And I want to also acknowledge the work of Enterprise Ireland and the direct equity investments that they continue to make in startups in the tech sector and other sectors across the country. I acknowledge that the banking environment has changed because of the departure of Ulster Bank and of KBC. It has narrowed the level of competition within the sector, and I have been engaging with the banks to make sure that they play a positive and a proactive role in meeting the funding challenge that I know many of you already are facing. Martina has mentioned the white paper on enterprise strategy, Enterprise 2025. The government is fully committed to working with all the stakeholders on implementing the measures set out in that white paper. And as you know, a working group of key state stakeholders being led by the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment is currently examining the issue of finance for scaling, and that will feed into our deliberations in the context of the budget. I know many of you welcomed the announcement of the Irish Innovation Seed Fund programme was launched back in 2022, the €90 million fund fund, and it's great now to see the first allocation of funding totaling 35 million euro was issued to Wake Up Capital just a couple of months ago in the summer. So that's really welcome. Of course, another key theme for us is about sustainability and tackling climate change and helping the private sector to continue on the journey of reducing our carbon footprint, investing in renewables, and ensuring that we do business in a more sustainable way and that we attract capital, which will be needed. There's an enormous amount of capital needed in the journey we need across a whole range of different sectors, but technology companies will play a leading role in identifying and providing the solutions that are needed. And I want to just reassure you that we are examining what more we can do in the context of the budget to assist businesses in their journey towards sustainability over the period ahead as well. So perhaps if I leave it at that for now, just to thank you once again for the opportunity. I'm really looking forward to listening to the two panel discussions that we have from the founders, and also on the question of funding and financing, because I know that is a top priority for Scale Ireland and for all of the members. But I'm here to listen first and foremost, and to congratulate you, Martina, on the timing once again before the budget. It's very fortuitous how you get this opportunity every year. Most organisations struggle to get one hearing in advance of the budget, but Martina and Brian have managed to secure at least two. So thank you all so much for the opportunity. I'm really looking forward to the rest of the event.
Thank you very much, Minister. And we're now going to get a move on and talk to our founders and then to our investment panel. I'm first of all going to welcome Jolan, who is a co-founder of WorkVivo, which is headquartered in Cork. Another coincidence, I can assure you. And it was sold to Zoom, as we all know, earlier this year for an undisclosed amount, and set up in 2017. WorkVivo employs 160 people, most of whom are based in Cork. And its clients include Bupa, Ryanair, Amazon. And before its acquisition, it had raised $40 million to date and has users in over 100 countries. So you're very welcome, Joe.
Thank you. We're also joined by Dee Coakley, who is the CEO and founder of Boundless, the global employment platform that enables companies to easily manage multi-country HR compliance, payroll, taxes and benefits. Set up in late 2019, Boundless now helps hundreds of companies in 25 countries to scale their team.
And finally, we're joined by Karina Turley, who is the co-founder and CEO of Capella. And that's a startup that provides user-friendly platform for HR and facilities teams to manage and optimize space usage in hybrid workplaces. Tongue twister, I have to say. Their clients include US tech-based companies, NGOs, government departments, state agencies, and Capella provides the data and the analytics for decision-making and planning in terms of workspaces and teams. So I am going to start with you, Joe. First of all, I have to say that you know the minister, but he may not know you, or at least you monitor him frequently in his constituency, which is another it is actually a pure coincidence. Can you tell us about that first of all? We might as well get that to one side.
Yeah, so I live in Carrigaline, which is where the minister is from as well. So yeah, very much local. But yeah, I've crossed paths, I suppose, with the minister. I've sent some messages in the past and things like that. We've got some engagement, which has been all positive, I can assure you, but no. So it's I was joking with my wife earlier, saying that we should carpool home this evening, given that we only live a few minutes away from each other. But yeah.
And I believe you spot him in the supermarket.
Yes, I do. Sorry, I didn't mention that. Yeah, so down in Barrycollin Super Value in Carrigaline. Who I would also run into Simon Coveney down there, believe it or not, as well. So it's the political ecosystem in Ireland. It seems a lot of it is centred in Carrigaline, which is nice.
Okay, we've got that over. Joe, your WorkVivo is a great example of a scaling company that has huge global ambition and success. And I suppose, can you tell us about your story with your co-founder, John, to your acquisition earlier this year? And you haven't disclosed, but we might as well ask how much it was sold for.
I'll come back to that one. But no, so I kind of try and keep it brief. Obviously, I could talk all day about our story. But myself and John we actually first knew each other in a previous company, Core HR, which is another software company based out of Ballincollig in County Cork. So we worked there together for a period of 7 years. I joined there as a graduate back in 2007. John was the chief operating officer there. By the time I left Core, I made my way up to the senior management team there, was the CTO. And then I left, went on what I call adventures in startup land, where I joined another Cork startup as their CTO, stayed there for about a year. And then in 2015, I started my first company, a music tech company called Subwoofer, and we'll maybe talk about that another day because there was definitely a lot of learnings coming out of that one. And all the while, John had gone on to become the CEO of Core HR. That company for many years was a family-run business, very profitable company. After I left, I'm not sure if it's because I left, but they kind of switched gears and went into growth mode, and they actually exited back in 2015 while John was the CEO there. So I guess the stars kind of aligned in early 2017. I was in a position where I probably wasn't really thinking about doing another startup. And John was exhausted from his exit to a private equity org, which was an interesting journey as well. So neither of us really had an appetite to do a startup, but I think when we synced back up together, we just knew that we wanted to work together. We had a very strong rapport, strong respect for one another. We complement each other in terms of skills. I'm the tech guy. They don't often let me outside the engine room. I'm usually back there coding and things like that. But and John is a very personal, outgoing networking type who's really good at sales, customer relationships and all of that. So between the two of us, we had all the ingredients to build a great company. When we started, that was like very much the kind of the foundation. We didn't start with, we want to build this product and bring this product to market. We started with, we wanted to work together. We wanted to build a great company. We didn't want to bring on investors from the start. I think we were both exhausted for different reasons from working with that space. So we wanted to bootstrap a company, and our ambition, like we're both ambitious people, but we didn't have a set goal of going public or reaching a certain valuation or selling the business or anything like that at that point in time. We just wanted to work on a really good company, work with really great people, and have a really good time in the process as well, and actually enjoy ourselves. So they were the kind of the founding principles. After a couple of years, I think we kind of hit an inflection point where we were doing really well, a lot of early growth. We won some really, really big customers throughout that journey. And we hit an inflection point where we had to make a decision. Do we want to build a moderately successful Irish software company, go down the profit route and be satisfied there? Or do we want to go out and get some petrol poured on the fire and see how far we can take this thing on the global stage? So no secret, we went down the latter road. I think we recognized the opportunity that we had with WorkVivo, specifically given the growth that we had up until that point. So in early 2020, just before COVID hit the mainstream media for around the world, we secured our Series A round with Frontline. I see Will is here today from Frontline, but Enterprise Ireland and Tiger Global based out of New York as well. So that was a 15 million euro Series A round. On the back of that, we continue to grow with a lot of great marquee customers, some of whom you mentioned already, Martina. And then last year we raised a Series B, relatively modest Series B for the climate at the time. I think valuations were going through the roof and lots of people were raising a lot of money. But we raised 20 million. It was like what we felt was the right amount for us at the time. And then drove on again with continued growth last year. And then obviously that brings us to kind of earlier this year. We actually were looking at adding some additional funding earlier on this year. I think the funding landscape, which we've probably talked about a little bit already, I'm sure we'll talk about a lot more today, is definitely interesting. And I think we felt that we were in a really strong position in that we were continuing to grow. We were continuing to have record sales quarters, which was kind of going against the grain for a lot of tech companies at the time. And we felt that was an opportunity for us to put some more cash on the balance sheet. Around the same time, Zoom came knocking, saying that they wanted to buy the business. And I think, for us, it was there was obviously a lot of consideration that went into, is this something we want to do? It was not expected, but I think there were everything really added up for us in terms of making the decision to actually go down that path, in terms of our future growth potential, the acquirer themselves, Zoom, their story, their trajectory, and the cultural fit between the two businesses, or values, and all of that as well. And just before I finish, I'm sorry I take loads of time, just on the undisclosed amounts, I'm not going to share what the amount was, I'm afraid. But what I will say is that, look, it was a very positive outcome, and I think, you know, you could talk to anybody, you could talk to Frontline, Enterprise Ireland, Tiger Global, any of our employees and team. Everybody connected with the business, you know, was very, very positive about the result, and so I think you can take from that for what you like. But no, that's it, I guess.
And thanks to you for also giving back so much to the sector and Scale Ireland, and you're renowned for that. So thank you, Joe. Brian.
So as a Roscommon woman, I don't have any clever way to connect you to the minister, I'm afraid. You're now scaling rapidly. You've hundreds of clients. What specific problems are you solving for those clients?
So the minister will be very happy to say, I often say we're a tax compliance company in many ways. We are a global employment platform. So we work with companies that have internationally distributed teams. And in countries where those companies might not have established operations, we will handle all of their HR compliance, payroll, taxes and benefits. So it's a fairly complex business. We are solving a very, very painful or an excruciating pain point, which means that, you know, customers really understand the value that we deliver. Again, the minister and his colleagues will be happy to hear that Ireland is actually one of the most straightforward countries in the world when it comes to registering an entity, registering for a tax code, and handling all of that here. It is astonishing how difficult some governments make it to get an employer tax code. There are countries where it can take a couple of years. So we're delighted about that. That's great for us. So we, you know, in those countries, we have our own entities, our own tax registrations and so on. So we are actually what's known as an employer of record. It means those customers within a couple of days can set up new employment agreements with new employees for the first time in a new country, and we handhold and guide them around all of that compliance.
And you've been growing aggressively, and you've got big plans to continue to expand and grow the business. Tell us a bit about that.
We do indeed. We have lots of great Irish customers. We work with companies like Fexco, Cubic Telecom, Code Institute, but 83% of our revenues come from companies that are international. We have customers across 25 countries. A large proportion of our revenue comes from the US, and the UK is also very important for us. In terms of where we can support employment, we're live now for 27 countries, really good spread across Europe. We also have lots of customer employees in Canada, Chile, Mexico, Brazil, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore. So it's quite a spread. For us, we founded the company in 2019. We've been supporting customers since mid-2020. In the early days, you'll take whatever customers you can get wherever they are. We have really to date depended on inbound. That's where most of our customers have come from. Arena, who's in the audience, joined us very early on, and we did, she mainly did a really great job of writing really high quality long form content, and that has served us very, very well in terms of bringing on board these smaller customers. But we see a really big opportunity for us to move up market now, and we're winning a lot of customer deals from competitors. So really big opportunity for us to aggressively go after that opportunity where competitors may have some quality issues, and onboard those larger customers that are big customers straight out of the gate. That means a lot of change for us. We need to have quite a very different sales motion on the demand gen side. We've been doing a lot of work to make this move. So it's very exciting. In many ways, it feels like it's a very kind of fresh project for us.
Okay. And Karina, can you tell us about what exactly Capella does and the breadth of your clients?
Sure. So at Capella, we help companies look after their hybrid workspaces. It's a really exciting area to be in. Obviously, the way we work has changed forever. And there's a huge opportunity for technology companies like us who can help get that right for organizations. What does that mean for employees? It means that they can book everything they need and look after their needs around hybrid working, whether that's booking desks, health and safety. For leadership, for HR, it's all around return to the office. So when you put our system in, we're helping HR deal with the challenges around return to the office and making sure that employees are getting a good employee experience. For facilities or operations, they're getting really deep data around occupancy, utilization, our employees matched with policy, heat maps. It nods into sustainability and hitting KPIs around sustainability. In terms of clients, Martina, we have a number of Irish SMEs of a couple of hundred employees through US-based technology companies and into semi-states and government departments. Minister, I'm hoping you'll be checking in on our technology pretty soon. Department of Social Protection is a good example of 6,500 employees who are using our technology every day. And yeah, I mean, it's a good story. We've got a great spread and we're growing. We're in a really exciting space.
And can you tell us about the seed round that you're going to be raising at the end of the year, where you identify your growth and expansion areas?
Sure. So we have a proven track record now of product market fit here in Ireland, and we're looking to the US. My co-founder is based in the US, and we always planned to bring Capella into the US market. So we're a female-founded company, and we're both from a sales background. So our plans are all around sales and scaling. We've a great CTO in Carlos Rodriguez there. So we have real confidence in the product. It's very robust and there's great comfort in that. So any kind of funding that we're looking at now is towards sales and scaling. In terms of funding we've taken to date, any private funding came from the States, and then Enterprise Ireland are an investor, and we would do regular reviews with Enterprise Ireland on our current needs and future funding needs. So we found them great as well.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to ask all of you now, what are the key challenges? I'm going to ask you to keep it brief. The Minister does have to get out at 1:30. So I'm going to start with you, Joe. What would you identify as one of the key challenges for either your company or the sector as a whole?
Yeah, I think from our company perspective, obviously it's a big change is happening at the moment, so probably won't go into too much detail on that. I think for the sector as a whole, I think I'm not going to elaborate on the funding challenges. I think that's pretty well documented, and I think there's some great proposals like the Scale Ireland are putting together. I think one of the things that founders have struggled with over the years is we've all got very vocal opinions around what we think, around what we need to change and all of that. But what we've lacked until we had Scale Ireland was a formal way of putting proposals together about how we can actually change things. And I think the proposals that Scale Ireland have prepared are really strong. The thing for me, I think that I'd love to see within the sector is specifically around regional development. And I think, within Cork, we have many great companies, and the ecosystem there is thriving. There's a lot of really good things happening. We've got some fantastic things like Republic of Work, for example, in Cork. But I think when we look at the kind of the community aspect of it, there's something lacking, right? And I think it's a lot of the times when we talked about it in Cork for years, there's like a bit of a digital donut, right? Which is like all of the tech companies in Cork are spread in industrial estates and commercial parks around the city, and there's a very small concentration of companies within the city itself. And that makes it really challenging for us to run events. I know DC has been running events like Built in Cork for years, and even just getting people to come into these events after work is challenging in terms of how you schedule it and get everybody incentivized to come in. So I think it's a hard problem to solve, but I would love to see us, invest more into the community aspect of the sector, because I think, being a founder can be a very lonely place. And, even when you have co-founders and all of that, there's a very small, number of people you can speak to about the challenges you face every day. And I think, creating a stronger community, particularly within the regions, I think is very important.
Thanks, Joe.
So Dee, as a scaling company, what would you identify as your key challenges?
So just a couple of things that you did reference when you were talking, Minister. So we have never applied for any grants from Enterprise Ireland because of the complexity of applying. There are amazing supports available there, and the irony is, when I was previously an employee COO, I used to lead applying for our grants and secured many grants, but I had time and capacity. We simply don't have that time at the pace we're growing at. So hearing that there's going to be simplification is very, very welcome. The other thing, both when we look at, I was a COO in the UK for many years and would have registered EMI schemes there for employee share option schemes. We get asked for advice from customers on employee share option schemes. They will often have Irish employees as well as employees in many other countries. And we look at how these things are done, in all of the countries where we support employment. And I would love to see a scheme that mirrors the UK EMI scheme, where companies can secure really great discounts or get approval for great discounts on the strike price for shares for their employees, because we need to be able to compete. So many companies now have team members in many countries, and they are performing a comparison across different territories, and very self-serving. I'm sure Joe would have something to say about it, but Entrepreneurs Relief, again, I would love to see us mirror the UK scheme there.
And Karina, now you're going to be fundraising at the end of the year. Can I guess what you would identify as the single biggest challenge?
So I would say fundraising. I know. So fundraising is always on the agenda for a company of our size with plans to scale into the US. And I suppose when I look at the kind of the narrative around it at the moment, there certainly does seem to be, it's a challenging environment to be fundraising in. But I think coming from kind of a corporate and entrepreneurial career background, I think where companies have kind of a robust plan and proposition in fundraising, when that's married with some metrics and a really strong team, I do think that there are opportunities there. And I think some of the soft supports that are coming out of Enterprise Ireland and even networks like this are hugely valuable to entrepreneurs at our stage, just in terms of that learning piece, that network, that ecosystem. So that's very much the water in which we're swimming at the moment.
Thank you very much. Minister, I'll give you an opportunity to give your feedback to Joe and to Dee and to Karina.
Okay, well, Joe, next time you're in Super Valley, be sure to say hello. We'll check the latest prices and see how inflation is doing. But congratulations on the transaction. We're all very proud of everything that you and the team have achieved. Well done. Yeah, I think the feedback is very interesting. So on the different schemes that are there, you mentioned CGT, Entrepreneur Relief. One of the issues with that is it's quite broadly based at the moment. I don't think it is really focused on innovation and high potential startups. It's become much more broad in terms of its application. And one of the consequences of that is that the cost of the kind of changes that you would like to see is really high. And of course, in the department, the methodology used for costing is we don't use dynamic costing. We don't assume behavioral change. And that's, I see Brian nodding his head. He's familiar with that, but it is an issue I'm acutely conscious of and I'm looking at. And the issue of red tape and simplification, it just consistently comes up. So I've had to challenge the system just to fully understand the reasons why. And as I say, when you are providing taxpayer support, you have to have checks and balances, but it shouldn't be at a level where it is deterring people from seeking support, whether it be a grant scheme or seeking to avail of a tax relief, which is there ultimately to be a catalyst and a support for investment and to help businesses take the next step. So I do think we will see some progress. So yeah, all of the issues raised are ones I am familiar with, and of course have been raised in specific terms by Scale Ireland, and it was clear your pre-budget submission was very well thought out and crafted, and you had specific proposals, which we certainly won't be able to do all of them, but I think we can make progress on some.
Thank you very much, Minister. And also just to say that Joe's point about community is very important, because we probably have the biggest, we are the biggest now representative organisation for this sector now, and all the various parts of the sector. It's great to see them in one room and helping each other, which I think is a fair point. So thank you, Minister, and also thank you, Joe, to Dee and Karina. And I'm going to ask you to move to the front row, and if you give them all a round of applause, please, as we ask for investment. And if you could all just bear with us as we are turning our attention now to the investment landscape.
So thank you very much, Martina. I'll actually start with the. Does everybody have a mic and so on? We're all turned on.
I think so.
Okay,
Testing.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks, Martina. So the Irish Venture Capital Association and Tech Ireland have both published figures on the level of investment in startups in the first half of the year. So this is great timing to get a read and an assessment of the investment landscape. To help us do that, we're joined by John Flynn, who's the managing partner of Act Venture Capital. John has 30 years of experience in software and venture investing. He oversees the investment activities of Act, which has raised 600 million across 6 funds and has a current fund of 140 million. And they've 126 technology companies. I think at this stage, close to 80 exits, with a collective enterprise value of about 4.6 billion.
So thank you, John. You're very welcome.
Thanks, Brian.
And also now we are delighted to be joined by Louise Phelan, who is a strategic advisor, and she works with global companies, many of whom are listed. Louise is, of course, a former vice president of PayPal, and she's currently a non-executive director of Kingspan and Ryanair, and she's also on the advisory board of RDI Hub in Kerry, and she is an angel investor in many Irish tech startups. You're very welcome, Louise.
And finally, Barry Brennan is a venture partner with Elkstone and is responsible for Elkstone's venture ecosystem initiatives. Elkstone has a €100 million seed fund for early stage startup companies, probably the largest fund in that space, which is a critical stage for companies. Portfolio of 50 tech startups. And Barry himself has 25 years experience as an investor and has also been an active angel investor over the years.
Right.
So John, I'll start with you. Can you give us your assessment of the investment landscape?
Sure. Hello, Minister, and hello, everybody. Thanks, Brian. I guess I'd start by saying it's a very difficult environment, and it has been. We're about 18 months now into what I would call, a down cycle. And I think we've another at least 18 months to go in that down cycle. There probably are some glimmers of improvement, and I'll talk to them both in the public and the private markets. But I think those glimmers add up to a scenario where we've probably hit the bottom. I do think the next 18 months will be better than the last 18 months. But I think also it's going to be what I would describe as a bottoms-up recovery. I don't think we're going to see the recovery coming from late-stage companies. I think the recovery is going to come from seed and Series A companies, and that's what I mean by bottom-up, because they're kind of counter-cyclical to what's been happening in later-stage companies. I think that, broadly speaking, good news for Ireland, and I'll come back to that. But if I start with the public markets, I mean, it's been a pretty eventful decade so far, in that we started the decade with a pandemic. We moved very quickly into a war scenario and still have it. And then we had supply chain issues, geopolitical pressures, and tightening of fiscal policies and inflation. And during that just over 3 years, we've seen the stock market, and I use NASDAQ as my proxy for tech, has increased by 60% after a 10-year boom cycle like we've never seen. Still managed to increase by 60%. In 2022, when that downturn happened, it lost nearly all of that gain. And then in 2023, as we've kind of rewarded efficiency, and I think efficiency is a key word there, we've seen maybe a 30% gain in the last year. So to say it's volatile would be an understatement. To say that we're finished with that seesaw volatility, again, I think would be an understatement. And corporation tax receipts will be volatile for the near future, I think, as a result of that. So looking to what's been going on in the private markets, and I think there's only been 2 phases in the private markets, and I'll concentrate on venture and talk to the global market, and then maybe comment on Europe and then comment on Ireland. So on a global stage, it's been a superfluous boom in the in the COVID era. We probably saw growth like we've never seen before in venture, and really rewarding what I would call low touch tech environments. There was a huge transition to hybrid working, a huge dependency on technology, and some companies had growth that they would never have seen. Public market companies and private companies just growing astonishingly well. Not all companies, so companies that had high touch environments and selling obviously got stuck in the lockdown scenarios, and it wasn't very, the same across all sectors, but in general, it was a very boomy period. Once the negativity started, I think what we saw in 2022 was about, from the highs that we saw in the US, the venture capital expenditure is down about 70%. That basically means it just stopped. It really just stopped. Late stage funding just completely stopped. There were some bright cycles on early stage funding, and I'll come back to that. But if I look at late stage funding, what would have happened there is that a lot of companies were completely overvalued. So if we take a company that grew from 1 million to 10 million in revenue and was valued at $1 billion, and the following year went from 10 to 20 million, which in any man's language or woman's language is great growth. However, the valuation would have gone from 1 billion to 200 million. So 80% reduction in value for doubling your sales. Not an easy task to motivate your staff with that message. So what happened is all shareholders, investors, management, all shareholders decided we do not want to go back to market in this period. We'll cut costs, we'll raise venture debt, we'll do anything we can not to reprice the company in this period. So what we have is a complete stop going on in venture landscapes at the extension of this, and that can't go on forever. So what I think is going to happen is those companies are going to start coming back, and they already have started coming back. We've seen a percentage of down rounds increase from about sub 5% last year to about 27%. So the down rounds of the companies that are coming back are pretty significant, and they're down rounds of about 50%, not the 70%, but that's the harsh reality of it. I think that's going to continue. I think companies will have to come back to market over the next 6 months. Having had debt on the balance sheet, it makes it even more difficult. So I think you're going to see a lot of consolidation in private markets of later stage companies. They're going to be forced, if they can't raise money at acceptable levels of valuation, they're going to be forced into M&A. So I think M&A is going to grow. If I look to Europe, well, first on the earlier stage side, earlier stage is counter-cyclical. So it is a great time to start a company. Starting company with an efficiency mindset, with less capital, means you're tighter. And when it comes back, when the companies scale, they're much better companies. So it is a good time to start companies, is one key message I'd like to get out. I think in terms of Europe as a percentage of early stage has grown from 5% back in 20 years ago, 2020, to now about 20%. So we've really grown up as a European society in the world of venture capital, which is fantastic, 4x growth. Now, we've given that half of that back in the last year. In terms of Ireland, I think our growth has been about 10x. So we've outperformed, and that's thanks to the pro enterprise environment that we have, the sports that we've got from the likes of Enterprise Ireland to the likes of ICE, of the government supports, it's helped a lot. So I think Europe is in much better place. If I go back to 2000, I would have thought that downturn was far more aggressive, and Ireland had subscale, Europe was subscale, and it really never managed to recover from it. Now I think we've got an opportunity to actually recover and gain ground in a downturn. There's always a silver lining to a downturn, and the downturn isn't affecting Ireland. If I look at Ireland, so Brian, you called out some of the numbers earlier on. It's interesting when you peel back and see that 40% reduction when you take out the infrastructure deals, which is true. 70% reduction in the later stage, more than 10 million rounds and to 30 million rounds, is consistent with what's going on a global basis. We're no different. What was interesting is in the 1 to 10 million category, we actually doubled, which is surprising and testament to the fact that we have got a fairly robust ecosystem. When Enterprise Ireland and ISIF apply their, if you like, metrics, if you like, our investment, that it actually does mean that we can gain ground in these sectors. So we need to continue to keep that going. The disappointment is in the under 1 million. But I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One, nobody's raised, very few people are institutionally backing seed rounds of less than 1 million anymore. They're now 1 to 3. It's a pre-seed problem, but that would explain something. Two, I think the HBAN, management of HBAN has transitioned during the year, and I think we're probably in a valley of transition. And three, I think the engine machinery is there because Enterprise Ireland have put in place a 100,000 up to 100,000 scheme, which I think those numbers, so I'm less worried that that's a long-term trend. And I would say, you know, just to wrap up, I think what we've given up, we're actually only back at 2019 numbers. So, you know, it could be worse, believe it or not.
On that note.
Thank you very much. And if you could hand over to Louise there. Louise, on that note, by the way, many people and most people, I suppose, would be aware of you from your very successful business career to date, and also your strong support of entrepreneurs throughout the years. But you're also an angel investor. You're very passionate about it. Can I ask you, and straight to the point, what are you looking for when you invest?
Sure. And John has depressed me deeply. So I'm delighted to be able to talk about angel investment and giving people money. And there's not enough of us giving entrepreneurs money. And I think there's an opportunity that we need to look at, Minister, on that, around that cap of 1 million. And I'll say no more. But if I think about angel investment and I'm very passionate about entrepreneurs. I mentor 8 entrepreneur women every year. I mentor individual women every year on their businesses. We'd have, you know, revenues over 1 million. But here's what I look for when I look at angel investing, because it's my money. And it's very important that my money is going to grow, not like what John is talking about back to 2019. I am looking ahead. I'm not looking back. And here's what I would tell you is a couple of things. First of all, I look at the founders or founder, and I feel, have they got the same passion and care about the product or service that I'm going to have if I'm putting my money in? That's number one. Number two, I look at the service or the product and see who their competitors are, and is there room in the market for that product or service? Because if there's not room in the market, I'm not interested, on the basis of there has to be that growth opportunity. The other key things I look at is, are they passionate in making sure the product is successful or the service? And are they passionate in bringing in the right people to set them up for success? And an example I'll give you of one of the investments that I'm involved in, and obviously the founder is the CEO. And we had to have that conversation. You're actually not good CEO. And you actually need to step aside and be that great founder and work in the business as opposed to being working on the business. And that really has turned the business around. That didn't mean the person was a bad person. That meant that they didn't have the skill and the competency to be a good CEO. So it's great when you have those difficult conversations, but it also is making sure that it's a growth opportunity for that business. So I think the real key piece is founders, and then what the product and service is, and is there a market, and is it competitive enough to make sure that product or service will grow?
Great talking.
Barry, firstly, briefly, please, because I'm very conscious that the minister needs to leave at 1:30. I also want to get your assessment of the investment landscape. You're very focused on early stage. I'm interested, are you seeing that bottom-up recovery, or what do you think?
Yeah, this is working, yeah.
It is.
Firstly, Minister, we were not selective in campaigning, asking for you. I met Richard Boyd Barrett this morning. It's at the back of the Shelbourne having a smoke, and I went up to him and I said, I have a selfie with him as well. And I said, do you know about Jeeber? And he didn't. But anyway, so he might come in to you and ask for some. Yeah. But I also said that my father was a trade unionist. He would have been sitting on the same side as Richard at dinner table if the two of us were having this kind of discussion. But going back, and I also love the passion of Louise around angel investing, because my origin was in angel investing. And for people who haven't done it, I guess be careful. But it's one of the best energy things you can get from the giving and from what I've been able to get. And I guess the origin of Elkstone is also in kind of from an angel background and bringing kind of LPs and angel investors in together. So we're lucky to be at, I guess, the stage where there's still opportunity. And I guess I think John put it very well. As if you look at the balance sheet, I started angel investing about 10 years ago. There aren't really many funds out there. I think there's 14 funds. If you look at what EI are doing from Helsinki to Singapore to London to San Francisco, I've actually seen it on the ground working with ISIF. There's a lot of stuff which is in good shape, but the complacency against the international environment is where I would be worried. And if you look from a founder perspective, I think it was put very well by the excellent panelists early. If you have a great idea at this stage, at a kind of early stage, great team, some evidence of traction, and particularly in the technology universe, I think there's a lot of options from the various funds, from John to Will to the other guys in the room here. There's segments in fintech, Wake Up Capital in the sustainable area, Yield Lab in agtech. So our ecosystem is absolutely transformed from what it used to be. I think the worry for me is indeed around the early stage, what's happening from an angel perspective, in particular in terms of that sub 1 million category. We'll come on to kind of EIS and that a little bit later. I do think making sure we have a competitive environment, and I've just come from another panel earlier before I met Richard for my chat, and the SEIS and the UK regime is gaining a lot of traction in the market. And if I were a founder, it's potentially logical. I don't love it for people to go to that regime. What that will mean is, and again, I have an English wife and 3 English children, so you'll have a lot of UK investors in Irish companies that should be owned by our own ecosystem, developing our own angel community, and recycling that capital back into our ecosystem. And I think for me, it's making sure, and I'm conscious of, there's EU drivers, there's other drivers in there, that we're really careful about the knock-on effects. Because when I think of Ireland, I think Estonia, I think Israel, I think the other jurisdictions that we're competing for in an international environment, and making sure that we keep our place and actually do even better in that, in terms of what that is. But you have the shopping list from the guys. We can send that to Richard later as well. See what he does.
I'll let you follow up on that, Ryan.
I did warn you, Brian. I said, about Richard.
So John, just kind of coming back to you briefly, I know that a big concern for the venture capital community is driving more institutional capital into the VC market. What can we do about that?
So it is probably the biggest bugbear I have in terms of, when we raise capital. We've, 20 years ago, we had a lot of defined benefit pension schemes able to invest in our funds. They've all disappeared. Now we've transitioned to investment from EI, EIF, the banks, and family offices. And family offices have grown substantially. So we probably got about 20 or so family offices representing over a third of our fund. And that's great. But I think the big gap that we have is that we don't anymore have pension funds participating because of what's claimed is over regulation at one level. And I think, if I look to the US, about 60% plus of venture investment is sourced from endowments or pension funds. If even in Europe, it's about 15%. And in Ireland, it's I think it's 0.1% or something like that. So it's the remnants of the defined benefit schemes that are brave enough to stay on the page. So, I look at two initiatives that I think the UK have put forward in policy, and I think they're worth thinking about. One is they recently said that they were going to get, I think, 5% of pensions mandated to invest in local venture. And I think with things like auto enrollment, I think that gives the country an opportunity to mandate such a requirement as well. I'm not sure how that will work, but I do think, although it may present a solution, it's a solution that takes probably too long to build up a fund of natural value. So I think another thing that the UK have proposed recently is the removal of the threshold for private pensions. Now, I think that's an interesting move that they announced in April of this year for private pensions, that they had reduced the threshold below where Ireland have it. But I think it's worth considering. I kind of, at some level, I think there must be some sort of like relationship between those two moves. And I think if we were to do something that gave, for a more immediate effect, the opportunity for private pensions to invest in Irish qualified venture funds, and on doing so, they get their thresholds, personal thresholds, lifted so that they can do that. I think that could be a real needle mover in the short term, because I think a lot of people, and the reason they've claimed they did it in the UK is they were losing talent that were leaving to go and retire. They were people getting into their 50s, had hit the threshold, had paid off their mortgage, and were saying, well, I'm just going to retire. What I hoped to be able to do was top up my pension over the next few years. Well, I think we could probably look at that, and maybe there's a big opportunity to have an immediate pool of capital available.
Thanks, John. And I'm going to move on to the 1 million, and obviously the investments are down in that. Louise, if you were trying to promote angel investment, I suppose, can you give us your insights on how that could be achieved?
Yeah, I just think we're missing a big trick. If you think about just what John talked about, if you think about people that have over 50, paid off their mortgage, can't top up their pension, there's money out there for angel investments. But the challenge is, first of all, the restriction of the million that we talked about, but also the fact that we're not tapping into these people. They're nervous because they don't understand really angel investment. They're not sure will they give the money and never get it back. So I think we have a huge opportunity with a lot of people that have money knocking around that's not actually working for them. And I think we need to figure out a way of getting that money back into the system, into the people like the people in this room. The other one panel said earlier on, I haven't done anything with the Enterprise Ireland, the Leos. To me, when I'm investing in angel investments, the first question I ask is, have you got a Leo? Because the Leos give a great help, great support. I understand people say that the paperwork is a bit detailed, but for me, it's the best place for an angel investor to start. Cut their teeth with a Leo, understand what's available, because there's great stuff available. The paperwork is not as onerous as it used to be, and that was a challenge in a conversation I had with Enterprise Ireland and a team of them in the last 3 weeks. I just feel we're missing a massive trick with people that have money in their over 50s and they're not able to top up their pension, and that money is there, but they're nervous to put it forward. And I feel there's a lot of people that would be delighted to be able to support businesses in this room and the startup community at a much lower level.
Thank you very much, Louise.
So Barry, the Minister, in fairness, mentioned the concerns about GBER rules, new state aid rules, and that potentially a lot of the good work that has been done to enhance the EIS scheme could be undone. What do you think we should be doing there?
Yeah, and I guess first to recognise the kind of efforts that have kind of borne fruit over the last number of years in terms of the simplification of the process for the companies. We do sessions, kind of panels in the environment to try and encourage companies to take EAS because of the past in terms of so I think that's a positive development. I think the changes also around investors being able to invest through funds in the Elkstone structure that we have that lets investors invest across different categories and in different years is again for us potentially a big changer in terms of the ecosystem. I think the worry from a GBER perspective, and I guess from our perspective, there's so many different points, and I know there's some consultation going out. We don't know we don't know where it's going to land, to be honest. I think a particular concern we would have, and firstly, I think we should be encouraging as an ecosystem investing in these companies. I think the EAS reliefs that we should be giving should be maximized to whatever is possible. But also sometimes investing through funds is obviously a positive, is a good way for investors to invest across different vintages and different individual companies. And I think we have some concerns around the rules on what reliefs would be available there. And that would be a potential backward step for us in terms of our whole ecosystem. Because again, one of the great things about Scale Ireland, the kind of community that we have here, and the communication that we're having even today with the likes of yourself, I think we just need to be really disciplined because the Estonians are coming up, the Israelis are coming up, UK is coming up, Scotland's coming up, Helsinki's coming up, and we don't want to be going backwards. But this stuff, it was only when I was thinking the law of unintended consequences is a very interesting issue in terms of looking at how, and you know all about tweaking tax systems, you know what can happen 2 years down the road, because there's really an opportunity from an early stage perspective. We're well positioned. I think there's some gaps. There are some gaps in terms of growth, and some of those larger 3 to 5 million opportunities are potentially in growth companies as well, where I think there's areas that we need to fill in terms of the funding environment. So again, great march for where we are. Let's really focus on letting people invest and invest through a fund structure. Again, will be my main area.
Thank you. Thank you, Barry. Minister, can I ask you to respond to the comments from our investor panel?
Yeah. Just to say, I'm joined by some of my colleagues from the Department of Finance, so they have been taking notes of the different issues
Martina told us
that have been raised in case.
And names as well.
In case I miss anything. But yeah, look, on GBER, there are strands of it where we have no discretion.
Yeah.
And that will result in certain instances in a restriction of some reliefs. But there are other areas where the scope is broadened and we can go further. So we've had to go through the detail of it, and that work is essentially being concluded now. So that will feed into the budget. I think, Louise, you make a great point about the amount of money that's out there. I mean, households, including private savers, have about 150 billion sitting in bank accounts, and of that, 140 billion are in accounts that are instant access and are not fixed term, and so are earning essentially 0.1%. And so if we have the proper structures there and we have the appropriate incentives there, I think there is potential to tap into some of that for people who have the appetite of taking on an investment. And John, I think it was interesting to hear your assessment that the recovery will be from the ground up. It will be from new startups, and we do have to support them in every way that we possibly can. And I believe that we have made good progress overall, and there is more we can do. It's good to hear you acknowledge ISIF, the Strategic Investment Fund. They have a lot of capital, so there's much more opportunity there. I think Nick Ashmore and the team are doing a really, really good job. And for example, some of the proceeds from the sale of bank shares, we've left those proceeds in ISIF, so their capacity to invest has been increased. So there's a lot of opportunity there, and you've acknowledged a number of you the role of Enterprise Ireland and the Leos and the good work that they do. So no, this was a really, really helpful and really useful and timely engagement. And perhaps, John, you might ask Barry to ask Richard Boyd Barrett if he would support relaxing some of the rules around pension tax relief, or providing more tax relief for high net worth investors. And if you have success in that front, come back to me, Barry.
I'll track him down on Dunleary Pier next time, definitely.
Thank you.
So my script says that we have time for a few questions. In fact, I'm afraid we don't. So as they say, that's all we have time for. So I want to bring this autumn gathering to a close. I'd like to thank the Minister for attending and for contributing to these discussions with founders and investors. His participation and engagement sends a very strong message to our community, particularly at such a busy period in his own schedule coming up to the budget. I'd also like to thank our founders, Joe, Dee and Creana, and our finance panel, John, Louise and Barry, for their contributions. And we're very, very grateful to Ross, Andy, and all the team at Avolon for hosting us here, and more importantly, for supporting us over the years. So particular shout out to Doug, Gillian, Matthias, and Roisin from the Avolon team. Thank you all.
And I go to thank the Scale Ireland team, because this would have not been possible without them. To Emily, Noel and Ronan, who are in the room. To Luke, Dave and Neve, who are not. Thank you for making this possible. To Ben, Adam, also Sandra and Gabrielle, our student helpers, and also Sandra, who's come down from Dundalk. Thank you very much for supporting our team today. Big thanks to our head of operations, Sheila Hart, who always makes things run smoothly, as does our head and planner, May Olden. Thank you very much for everything you've done to put this together. And I also want to give a shout out to our sustainability working group, you members of whom are in the audience today. And most of all, thank you, because as Joe said, this is about being a community. In late 2019, Scale Ireland was set up. We only held our first in-person event here last year, and we're growing at a pace. So thank you very much for your support. Thank you.